Ladies and gentlemen, let us not pretend tonight. Let us not dance around the obvious. Let us speak the truth that rattles Washington, the truth that shakes the corridors of power in Brussels, in London, and yes, in New Delhi too, because something happened, something historic, something that no one in America saw coming, but every Indian heart knew was inevitable. India just made a move so decisive, so unapologetic, so unshakable, that the world's so-called superpower has been left clutching its chest in disbelief. And what was that move? India chose itself. India chose its people. India chose its path. For decades, the US believed that India could be nudged, pressured, coerced into aligning with Washington's agenda. They thought India would always be the junior partner, the follower, the ally who nods in silence while decisions are made in DC. But when New Delhi announced boldly, clearly, unapologetically, that it would continue buying oil from Russia, investing in its own defense sector, forging technology deals outside of American approval, and rejecting the dictates of Western sanctions, that was not just a policy decision. That was a statement, and the statement was this: India is no longer a pawn. India is no longer a marketplace to be exploited. India is no longer a hesitant voice in the background. India is a power, a decisive, independent, unstoppable power. Now pause for a moment and think, why does this one move shock America so deeply? Is it because of the oil barrels? No. Is it because of the trade numbers? No. It is because of what it symbolizes. For the first time in modern history, India has refused to bow, not to threats of sanctions, not to lectures of morality, not to the arm twisting that smaller nations often surrender to. Instead, India stood tall and said, "Our decisions will be made in New Delhi, not in Washington." When India doubled down on importing energy from Russia, despite US pressure, it wasn't just about fuel. It was about survival, yes. It was about affordability for its citizens, yes. But most importantly, it was about sovereignty. Because sovereignty is not just a word in the Constitution. Sovereignty is action. It is the refusal to let others dictate the lifeline of your economy, the growth of your people, the destiny of your nation. And let me remind you, this is not the first time India has shocked America with its resilience. In 1998, when India tested nuclear weapons in Pokhran, the US slapped sanctions overnight. They thought those sanctions would cripple India. They thought India would crawl back, apologize, retreat. Instead, India endured. India innovated. India emerged stronger. And within a decade, America itself came knocking on India's door, signing the landmark civil nuclear deal. History is repeating itself today. America may threaten secondary sanctions, may issue warnings, may lecture from podiums, but India is not listening. Because India has learned, the world respects not the obedient, but the defiant. The world respects not the follower, but the leader. And tonight, let us ask ourselves, why should 1.4 billion people sacrifice their energy security because Washington demands it? Why should India slow down its growth? Because America is uncomfortable. Why should India accept hunger, inflation, and unemployment to please a foreign power? No. India's first responsibility is not to Washington. India's first responsibility is to its people, to the farmers who need affordable fertilizer, to the families who need affordable fuel, to the industries that power our growth, to the young men and women whose dreams cannot wait another century. The move India just made, the move that has left the US stunned, is about more than economics. It is about declaring to the world, India will no longer be guilt-tripped into decisions. India will no longer be shamed into obedience. India will stand tall, take bold choices, and accept the consequences with dignity. And make no mistake, the consequences will come. Washington is already murmuring about reducing defense cooperation, slowing down technology transfers, isolating India diplomatically. But let me tell you this, these threats are not new. They are as old as empires. Every time a nation has dared to rise, the old powers have tried to cut it down. But did they succeed against China? Did they succeed against Russia? Did they succeed against nations that refused to kneel? No. And they will not succeed against India, because India's greatest weapon is not oil, it is not missiles, it is not even its army. India's greatest weapon is the will of its people. A billion voices rising as one, declaring, we choose our destiny, we write our story, and no superpower on this earth will hold the pen. So tonight, America is shocked, Washington is rattled, analysts are panicking on primetime television. And they all ask the same question, why did India do it? The answer is simple, India did it because it could. India did it because it must. India did it because history demanded it, and this is only the beginning. Let us peel this back even deeper. Because the shock in Washington is not only about oil, not only about trade. It is about the unraveling of an illusion. For decades, America believed it had India figured out. They thought India would forever chase the West's approval. They thought New Delhi would sacrifice autonomy for validation. But today, India has proven them wrong. And not with slogans, not with protests, but with action, with policy, with courage in the face of pressure. Let us remind ourselves, when the war in Ukraine began, Washington assumed it could rally the world behind sanctions. They expected nations to fall in line, one after another without question. Europe did, Canada did, Japan did. But when they turned to India and said, choose us or Russia, India responded with the silence of strength, and then with the clarity action. India kept buying Russian crude. In fact, India ramped it up, turning Moscow into one of its top energy suppliers. Why? Because India is not naive. India knows that cheap energy fuels growth. India knows that sanctions may suit Western economies, but they suffocate developing nations. And India knows that its rise cannot be scripted in Washington's playbook. But it goes further. When India bought discounted Russian oil, it didn't just use it domestically. It refined that oil, added value, and sold it onward, sometimes even to Europe itself. Imagine the irony, the same nations pressuring India not to trade with Russia ended up buying Indian refined products, which originated from Russian barrels. That is not just strategy, that is brilliance. That is India saying, if you want to play the game, we will play it better. And while Washington fumes, India is doing something even more remarkable. It is building a parallel architecture of survival. Think about it, defense deals diversified away from dependence on any single power. Technology partnerships forged with both the West and the East. Trade agreements expanded with ASEAN, Africa, the Middle East. Financial systems strengthened to reduce reliance on Western institutions like SWIFT. Does that not sound familiar? It should, because that is exactly what rising powers do. They hedge, they diversify, they refuse to be cornered, and in doing so they protect their sovereignty. Now ask yourself, why is America so rattled? If India were weak, if India were irrelevant, would Washington even care? No. The outrage is not proof of India's weakness, it is proof of India's strength. The more America shouts, the more it proves that India matters, that India's decisions shake the system. That India is not just a participant in global politics, it is a driver of it. But here is where the story gets even sharper, because America thought it could use defense as leverage. Washington whispered, if you don't align with us, we may rethink defense sales. But India was ready. For decades, India relied on Soviet and Russian hardware. And now India is building its, from fighter jets like Tejas, to missile systems like Agni and BrahMos, to warships sailing proudly under the tricolor. India is declaring, we will not be held hostage to foreign weapons. And when America tried to use technology as a tool of influence, India replied by investing billions into its semiconductor ecosystem, signing deals with Japan, South Korea, and even Taiwan. India is building its own digital backbone, its own chips, its own cloud networks. Do you see the pattern? At every turn where America expected obedience, India responded with independence. Where Washington expected guilt, India answered with growth. Where the West expected dependence, India forged self-reliance. And let us not forget history. When America cut off aid in 1965, India fed itself with the Green Revolution. When sanctions rained down in 1998, India built its nuclear deterrent. When crises hit global markets, India insulated itself with reforms. Every attempt to weaken India has only made it strong. Every external pressure has only hardened its resolve. So why should this time be any different? And I ask you tonight, is it cheating when India chooses survival? Is it betrayal when India chooses independence? Is it disloyalty when India puts its own people first? Or is it simply dignity? Is it sovereignty? Is it the essence of what every free nation must do? The truth is, America does not fear India's choices, it fears India's example. Because if India can rise on its own terms, then others may follow. Others may break free from the old power structures, from the economic and political cages designed decades ago. And when that happens, America's monopoly on influence ends. That is why Washington is not just shocked. It is nervous, it is anxious. It is watching a giant awaken, a civilization reclaim its voice, a nation refusing to apologize for its ambition. And let me tell you, this awakening cannot be reversed. Not with sanctions, not with speeches, not with threats, because what we are witnessing is not just India making a move. It is India becoming the move. It is India becoming the force no one can ignore. And tonight, America knows it. Now let us cut through the noise and look at the hard reality. Because this one move, India's refusal to bow, India's decision to chart its own course, has exposed not only America's anxiety, but also the shifting balance of global power. Ask yourself this: why did the US expect compliance in the first place? Because for decades, Washington built a system designed to keep others dependent. Oil markets priced in dollars, financial transactions routed through American systems, global institutions from the IMF to the World Bank, structured in ways that preserved Western leverage. And for years, nations played along. But today, India has shown the courage to step outside that script. Consider the scale of what has just happened. India is now the world's third largest oil consumer. Every barrel it buys affects global prices. When India chose Russian crude, it wasn't just an economic choice, it was a geopolitical thunderclap. Because suddenly America's sanctions were not universal. Suddenly the rules-based order that Washington loves to preach looked fragile, selective, even hypocritical. And then India took it further. Instead of apologizing, India explained its logic. We are a nation of 1.4 billion. We need affordable energy to grow. We will not let your wars, your rivalries, your geopolitics decide whether our children get electricity, whether our industries survive, whether our people thrive. That explanation was not just policy, it was defiance dressed in dignity. But the real masterstroke came when India didn't just consume Russian oil, it transformed it. Indian refineries turned crude into diesel, gasoline, aviation fuel, and shipped it back into the very markets trying to squeeze Moscow. Europe, struggling with its own energy crisis, ended up buying from India what it refused to buy directly from Russia. That is not cheating. That is chess. That is strategy in its purest form. And this is why Washington is rattled. Because India did not just resist pressure, it outmaneuvered it. Now let's widen the lens. What does this say about India's future position in the world? Look at the numbers. India is projected to be the fastest growing major economy for years to come. It is already the hub of global IT, pharmaceuticals, and service. Its digital revolution has created one of the most connected populations on the planet. And its military modernization is accelerating. Aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, space capabilities, cyber warfare readiness. When America looks at India, it sees not just a partner, it sees a potential rival in influence. And that is why every independent Indian move, no matter how logical, is framed in Washington as defiance. Because deep down, America knows if India rises, the unipolar world. But let us not forget, this is not the first time India has shocked America. Go back to 1974, India tested its first nuclear device, Smiling Buddha. Washington was stunned, sanctions followed, technology was denied, but India persisted. And in 1998, when it conducted a series of nuclear tests, the US again erupted with outrage. Yet within a few years, America had no choice but to recognize India as a legitimate nuclear power. History is repeating itself. Every time India asserts independence, America reacts with anger, but eventually it is forced to adjust. Why? Because India is too big to ignore, too vital to isolate, too resilient to crush. And now, with this oil strategy, India has proven once more that it cannot be dictated to. The UN may try to spin the story, may threaten secondary sanctions, may raise voices in Congress, but the truth remains: the world needs India more than India needs the world. Think about it, from pharmaceuticals during the pandemic, to IT services powering Silicon Valley, from space collaborations to trade partnerships, India is embedded in the global system. To alienate India is to weaken the very order America claims to defend. So here's the uncomfortable truth. Washington must confront: bullying India no longer works, threats no longer intimidate, pressure no longer bends policy. India has reached that inflection point where its choices shape the world, not the other way around. And here's the deeper message to the American people, to the American policymakers: India is not your pawn. India is not your dependent. India is not here to fight your wars, to pay for your mistakes, or to validate your moral posturing. India is here to rise on its own term, with its own vision, for its own people. Yes, alliances matter. Yes, partnerships are valuable. But let there be no illusion: India will never sacrifice sovereignty for friendship. That era is over. The old equation is dead. The new India does not ask for permission. It does not beg for favor. It does not need validation. The only question left is this: will America learn to live with an India that refuses to be controlled? Or will it continue down a path of confrontation, resentment, and isolation? Because make no mistake, India has made its choice. The move has been played. The shock has been delivered. And the world will never be the same again. Ladies and gentlemen, let us not pretend that this is just about oil. This is about a tectonic shift in global power. This is about an India that no longer asks, "What will America think?" but declares, "This is what India will do." And that one move has sent tremors across Washington, across Brussels, across every capital that once assumed New Delhi would always fall in line. Now let's be clear. America is not used to being challenged by its so-called partners. When a rival like China pushes back, Washington expects it. When Russia defies sanctions, they brand it aggression. But when India, a democracy, a strategic partner, a nation once courted with handshakes and state dinners, suddenly stands tall and independent, this is not just unexpected, it is unacceptable to them. And that is why the language from American officials has shifted from friendly persuasion to veiled threats, secondary sanctions, economic consequences, diplomatic fallout. They throw these phrases like arrows, hoping one will pierce India's armor. But here is the truth. Those arrows fall short, because India's shield is not arrogance, it is legitimacy. It is morality. It is necessity. Think about it. India didn't move to destabilize global markets. India didn't make a reckless gamble. India simply made the rational choice to secure energy for its people at affordable rates. Is that crime? Or is that sovereignty in action? Why should a farmer in Punjab, a factory worker in Maharashtra, a student in Bengaluru pay the price for conflicts India did not start? Why should the aspirations of 1.4 billion people be held hostage to rivalries that serve no Indian interest? And yet America acts as though India has broken some sacred covenant. But let us turn the mirror around. Where was this sacred morality when the US invaded Iraq without global consent? Where was it when sanctions strangled ordinary citizens of Iran? Where was it when financial crises triggered in Wall Street rippled across the developing world? The truth is, America's outrage is not about morality. It is about monopoly. They are angry because the script is no longer theirs to write, and that right there is the shock. India has proven that the so-called rules-based order is not a one-way street. Rules are not decreed in Washington and obeyed in Delhi. Rules are negotiated, adapted, challenged, and sometimes rewritten. And today, India is holding the pen. But the story does not end here, because the ripple effects of this one move are only beginning. Already nations in Asia, Africa, and Latin America are watching closely. If India can stand tall against US pressure, why not them? If India can secure its interests unapologetically, why should they not? India's defiance becomes their inspiration, and that is why Washington fears this moment, not just because it lost influence over India, but because it may lose influence over the entire global South. And let us remember, this is not isolationism. India is not cutting ties. India is not burning bridges. India continues to trade, to partner, to cooperate with the West. But it does so on equal terms, not submissive ones. That is the difference. That is the revolution. So what comes next? Will the US double down on threats, corner itself into alienating a partner it cannot afford to lose? Or will it recalibrate, accept reality, and build a relationship based not on dominance but on respect? The ball, my friends, is in America's court. Because make no mistake, India has already moved. India is investing in its own future, building infrastructure at breakneck speed, fueling its digital economy, reforming its defense sector, expanding its manufacturing base. While Washington debates how to deal with India, India is busy preparing to lead. And when a nation of 1.4 billion is fueled by confidence, strategy, and vision, it becomes unstoppable. This is the India the world is now waking up to. An India that shocks not with recklessness, but with resolve. An India that refuses to be lectured, refuses to be bullied, refuses to be anything less than sovereign. So yes, America has been shocked. But here's the final truth. This is not India's problem. It is America's lesson. The age of obedience is over. The age of independence has begun. And the sooner Washington understands that, the sooner it can build a future where India and America walk side by side, not as master and servant, but as equals. This is not just a policy debate. This is a turning point in history. The move has been made. The world has been shaken. And the question is no longer whether India will rise. The question is whether America can accept a world where it no longer stands alone at the top. Because India has just shown the world that true power is not in threatening others, but in standing firm for yourself. And that, my friends, is the shockwave America never saw coming.